It's How I Make Money with Andy Beadle. Our guest this week is Noel Bagwell. He is the proprietor, owner, leader, and starter of ExecutiveLP. They do legal counseling for businesses. He also has a fantastic podcast, which you are definitely going to check out, called the Profit from Legal Podcast. And I do want to say before we get started, Noel, we talked about this a little bit before we started taping. One of the best pieces of advice I got 20 plus years ago when I went into business was the guy who's been my personal and business attorney now for almost 30 years said, Andy, sometimes there's nothing so sweet in life as the love of a good lawyer. And I love what you guys do. I think not only is the idea innovative, but it's just so necessary, and it's something that a lot of business owners neglect. Now, you mentioned early on something I'd personally never heard, and everybody's like, oh, yeah, I've heard that. You talk about the bail team. Could you, just before we get going, talk a little bit about the bail team for business owners and what that all means?
Yeah, the bail team's an acronym. Frankly, it's missing some components, and it's a little out of order, but it's still a useful acronym. It's BAIL, stands for Banking, Accounting, Insurance, and Legal. Now, I can't take credit for that. I actually teach a class for the U.S. Small Business Administration and Department of Defense at Fort Campbell. The Boots to Business course, I teach the legal component of that and have for the last 7 years or so every month. And it's part of the SBA's whole shtick on entrepreneurship is you need to have the right support, and you need to have a banker, an accountant, an insurance professional, and a lawyer, BAIL. I honestly think that that's missing a couple of things that you absolutely have to have, like marketing and sales. You need help with marketing and sales. You probably shouldn't do that yourself unless it's an absolute necessity. Although early on in a startup, you're going to be closing a lot of sales yourself. And I also said, I think it's out of order. I think you really do. And this sounds self-serving, I know, but it's the truth. You need to start with the lawyer, not tack him on at the end as an afterthought to the acronym, because lawyers, as I was telling you when we were talking before the show started, lawyers are at core problem solvers and relationship managers. So if you're going to have relationships with all these other people, both in your business, you've got key employees, you've got stakeholders in your business, and then outside your business, you have vendors and suppliers, you have customers, and so on. If you're managing all these relationships, you really ought to have a lawyer helping you to structure the incentives and write the contracts and all that stuff.
Yeah, I would thoroughly agree with that, and I definitely want to get to talking about how you guys do what you do soon. But for our listeners who are not, who have not been in business for a long time and are just starting, I'll say a tough thing as a business owner, which now you got to wear both hats. You're like the owner of the business and an attorney. So now you've got to fight with yourself all the time. But as a business owner, realizing that, your attorney's role is, I think we go to lawyers and ask them to tell us what to do in a way. And attorneys are good at figuring out a path of action, but at the end, they're advisors. And, you decide how you want to go forward. You decide what you can and can't do. And what I've really appreciated in our relationship with our legal team in the last 2 decades and through 4 businesses, this is my 4th business, has been the fact that my attorney gives me options and says, well, okay, here's the relative, here are different ways to do this. Here's some risk and reward. Here are kind of where you could have liability exposure, so on and so forth. And by having those conversations ahead of time, I'm able to go into situations with a bank, with an insurance agent, with my accountant and go, okay, here's what I think I want to accomplish. And I know that whatever gets decided there, I'm not going to have my attorney say, okay, you idiot, now you're going to be in a lot of trouble. And I will say I've had numerous friends, more than 10, less than 20, who have basically signed intent agreements on selling their businesses without talking to their attorneys first, which has always blown my mind. I've never understood that.
Well, if it's a letter of intent, that's not typically legally binding. So I wouldn't scold someone as a client too awfully badly about that. Right. If it's an actual contract, like a legally binding agreement to sell the business, without having it reviewed by an attorney, that's foolish.
Yeah,
100% of the time. So I would point that out to someone.
Well, talk to your
leave it to everybody's own counsel.
Talk to your
yeah,
attorney early and often. Early and often. Well,
Early
hey,
and often.
so enough free legal advice for the listeners here. But seriously, so you got started. You got started, and I take it you were a practicing attorney and decided to do this. How did you end up starting ExecutiveLP?
There's a bit of that. That's like partly accurate. So I actually avoided going to law school and becoming a lawyer. I should say, just reaching back into the dark ages before I even started practicing law. I have a degree in philosophy, which I didn't actually start college to get a degree in philosophy. I started out as a double major in business administration and computer science, and so had a bit of an existential crisis. And in college, and switched to philosophy. And then when I graduated, I was raised like deeply religious as well. My parents were fundamentalist evangelical Protestant Christians, Bible Belt strong, all that stuff. And so I was raised in a very, very strong Baptist tradition. And with all that Bible knowledge and a degree in philosophy, it seemed like the next logical step would be go to seminary, learn to be a minister. So I went to seminary. I went to a Baptist seminary in Wake Forest, North Carolina.
Okay.
And I hated it. I was there for a year. It just wasn't, it wasn't exactly what I thought it should be. And I just had a lot of differences of opinion with them. So I left after about a year. I didn't finish my Master's of Divinity degree, and I ended up working in luxury property management a couple of years. I've always had this strong entrepreneurial streak. I started working when I was 15. I've had just under 30 jobs. I've been fired from about 25% of them because I have a huge problem with authority and just a strong independent streak. And mostly I want things like, for me, things are broken. People say if it ain't broke, don't fix it all the time, right? But for me, things are broken if they're not as good as they can be. Sure. And so that's probably too high a standard to have. I acknowledge that, but nevertheless, it's mine and I love it. And so I have taken that with me in every job that I've had. And so that tends to rock the boat a lot and cost me my job from time to time. But it makes me a really good lawyer. So after working in luxury property management a couple of years, I said, fine, okay, well, I don't want to just think deep thoughts about being unemployed with this degree in philosophy. I went to seminary, that didn't work out. Probably I'm not going to get into a great PhD program if I wanted to do that, because I went to a small state school for undergrad. Right. And so what's left? Law school. I went to law school as kind of a fallback provision. And a lot of people, for them, that's like their highest aspiration in life. Oh, I'm going to be, Perry Mason, Matlock. I'm going to be whoever's on LA Law. I don't know. I'm probably really dating myself with these references, but these are the shows that I grew up on with my dad watching them because he was a lawyer. Okay. And my grandfather was district attorney in our hometown for 16 years. So I just grew up in a family of lawyers. And it's probably that problem with authority and rebellious streak that caused me to not want to do that in the first place. So anyway, went to law school after all, got in, of course, the story, I am where I am. So the story kind of tells itself. It's not super exciting, but I was a couple of years behind the curve. And this is where it starts to get interesting. I was a couple of years behind the curve going into law school because I had taken this long and windy path to get there. Right. And so that caused me to do two things. It caused me, number one, to be highly motivated to take classes that I thought would give me an edge of knowledge when I got into practice. So I was really, really careful about which classes I took in terms of electives. Your first year, all your classes are chosen for you in law school. You don't get any choice. But then second and third year, you really kind of build out the foundation of your practice knowledge that you're going to have when you get into practice. So I took all the business classes, all the like GPA killing, brutal, hard, like securities regulation, corporate finance, all the uniform commercial code stuff, all the stuff that makes people do exactly what you just did, just kind of, like. So
you are a glutton for punishment. Wow. Okay.
A total masochist, at least cognitively and psychologically, apparently. I got top marks in economic analysis of law. That really became a passion. I fell in love in law school with economics. And when I was sort of priming myself without paying a whole lot of attention to what was going on in the world, it was 2008 financial crisis. And of course, it's in the news and all of that. And so I sort of knew the economy was on fire. And I knew generally that hiring was tough, but I assumed wrongly that there would be lots of jobs for highly qualified candidates when I got out. When I graduated a semester early from law school in December of 2011, I sat for the bar exam in February of 2012, passed the first time, got my license right away. And I had been clerking for this guy who was general counsel for a couple of small banks in Middle Tennessee. And he did offer me a job.
Okay.
Don't really have any other job prospects. So that was nice. He offered me a job, but he made me a really interesting offer that appealed to my entrepreneurial streak. And this is where that fire got restarted for me. He said, now I'll hire you and here's what I'll pay you and here's the way things will be and so on and so forth. Or have an office space in my building that I own and you can just hang out your shingle. If you don't like that, you can just hang out your shingle and take whatever cases you can get, whatever clients you can get, whatever comes in the door. And it was just, the offer was too good to refuse. The rent was cheap. It's like $300 a month or something. It was like really cheap. I got to use like all his office machines. He didn't care, his Wi-Fi. So it was like pretty cheap. You know, I could just, all I really need, I thought I'll just buy a computer and start my own practice and then I'm good to go. Right. Bought some office furniture. You know, it was pretty cool. It was in this old Victorian house. So I was like, look at me. I've got a law office. I still have my little sign that was out front. It's hanging in my garage now. The law office of Noel Bagwell. Right. About 6 months in, I was like, I'm going to kill myself. This is terrible. This is the worst. Why did I do this? What a mistake. And every entrepreneur that started a business has probably been through a moment they felt that way. They were like, what have I done? What have I got myself into? I was taking court-appointed cases. I was guardian ad litem for a couple of kids. I was solicitor ad litem for some parents. So I got to see some stuff that was the ugly underbelly of society. I was court-appointed to represent people who were like meth cooks, stuff like that. It was not at all what I went to law school for. You know, taking all the business law classes, I was not living my best life as what I wanted to be, like a corporate attorney.
Sure.
I had a few civil business clients that came through my office and they had easily preventable disputes, like legal law, like lawsuits, whatever, legal matters. And I had a few that were wanted, like contract drafting and things. I was getting some very minor small business work, but a lot of it was stupid. It was like, why didn't you hire a lawyer in the first place? Why are you in this lawsuit over this? Yes, you know, like this is a ridiculous thing to sue people over, small claims court, whatever. And I would explain to the client, you're now spending thousands of dollars on litigation when you could have spent a couple $100s to prevent it. Why? What is your, not like what is your problem, but what is the problem? And the answer to that was reflected in a paper that was written for the National Center for Preventive Law. And this lawyer who wrote it titled the paper, "What's the Matter with Lawyers?" And he said that there are 3 problems with lawyers. He said that lawyers are not affordable, lawyers are not accountable, lawyers are not accessible to their client.
Yeah.
And I thought those should all be easy problems to solve. But what we really need to do is look at the incentives. Again, going back to my economics in the law, the economics training that I fell in love with in law school. Incentives matters. The very first fundamental law of economics. Incentives matter. Everybody responds to incentives. What are the incentives that people have for not hiring a lawyer? What are the incentives they would have to hire a lawyer? And how can we restructure? How can we change the game? How can we change the incentives to which people respond such that now will get what they really need? They will get the legal support that they need in advance, because everybody really does. Every single business really does need a lawyer from day one. But they don't recognize the need. They don't feel the need. They don't see the need. So they don't respond to it because people don't buy what they need. They buy what they want. And
yeah, we can come back to that. But I think another thing, and maybe this is the nail on the head with you talking about the, you know, affordability, accessibility, accountability. I think as a business owner and you're just starting out and you do your business plan or you go through one of the SBA's, you know, programs as an entrepreneur to kind of get started or any of that, and you go, all right, so I'm going to hire an attorney and this person is going to be my single most highly compensated team member by hour running away when I start my business. I think business owners look at that and they go, man, $185 an hour, which is still not getting you. I mean, that's a pretty reasonable rate for an attorney, in my opinion.
That's cheap. Yeah, the national average is $200. Yeah, national average is $235 per hour for outside general counsel. And again, that's the national average. It varies by market. So if you're in a less expensive market for legal services, it'll be less. But if you're in like San Francisco, New York, Denver, you know, someplace where or Chicago. There's a lawyer out of Chicago I know that charges $1,000 an hour, and I was just like, because I was in this continuing legal education class with him, and I signed up for the class because the title of it was, I won't say it word for word because then people will go look it up. But it was something like how to justify your fees, how to justify price increases or whatever, despite COVID and all this. And the guy that was in there is a Harvard educated lawyer, brilliant people. But they were in there talking about how they charge $1,000 an hour and how to justify it. And I just thought, well, for small businesses, you're never going to justify. If you make more than the boss, you make more than the business owner. Like if you're charging more per hour than they're actually making, then you're going to have to really show them that it's a profitable proposition, that you're not actually just earning more wages than they're earning. You need to show them that if they spend X, they will get Y, where Y is greater than X. You just when you thought you'd never use algebra, right? You need to show them that they're going to get positive return on investment. So if you can do that, then you can persuade small business owners. And that actually, the guy who wrote the paper for the National Center for Preventive Law, he was on to something there. I think he was not wrong that lawyers do need to be more affordable. They do need to be more accessible. They do need to be more accountable. But when we talk about affordability for small businesses, the question is not, do you have the money that you could pay to a lawyer without depriving yourself of something else that you need? That's not the question. Because I actually had a client who said that it would hurt their year-over-year profitability if they extended their service or if they signed up for new services from us or whatever, that they weren't willing to dip into their carryover profits from the year before.
Right.
And I thought, okay, so this is not money that's earmarked. This is your profit margin. This is this is not money that's earmarked for some expense that you need. You're telling me that you're not willing to take money that you have and spend it on something that I sincerely believe you need to grow your business and reach the next level of productivity. And it just blew me away. I was like, okay, so you can afford it, but you're refusing to buy it because it could hurt your profitability. So the calculus for you in your mind, and he's a very business savvy person, like super respect the client who had the business acumen to make the decision he made. I didn't agree with the decision, but I agree. I respect his logic. The logic was, unless you can show me that you're going to improve our profitability, we're going to say no. So he was like, profit first. I don't know if you've read that book, Profit First, but he was like super into that, and just everything had to be about profitability.
Right.
And that checked me, because up to that point, my whole approach to delivering legal services was about showing a small business owner, you can predict the cost of this. It's a reasonable expense that you need to predict in your business. It's part of banking, accounting, insurance. And in other words, it's cost of doing business. If you can't afford a lawyer, you can't afford to do business. I would say stuff like that. I still stand by that. But that wasn't the full picture. The full picture wasn't just, do you have enough money that you could buy this, and do you recognize the intrinsic value of the services? You actually, as a lawyer, need to go a step further and have the conversation with the client about how your services make the client more profitable. Because if you can't do that, the smartest small business owners, the savviest people who put profitability above all things, are still not going to hire you, even if you can tell them, I know down to the penny what you're going to spend this year on legal services, which most lawyers can't do because they're billing by the hour. But if you change your model like we have, and you have a different business model that lets you be able to do that, where you can predict the cost, you can tell them in advance so they can adjust their pricing and pass on the cost of your services in the form of prices to consumers. If you can do all of that, they're still probably not going to hire you unless you can show them that they're going to see positive ROI from it.
Well, and let's talk a little bit about that, because the traditional relationship that you think of with an attorney as a business owner is you're paying by the hour, right? And so then maybe you've got a problem. You go, oh, I got to negotiate this contract, or maybe I'm doing benefits, or heaven forbid, I've got some issue with a vendor or a client or whatever, and I'm trying to keep it out of court. And I know that. It's funny. It's funny you say. I'm thinking about our legal usage over the last however many years, and I don't think I've ever looked at the hourly rate on a legal bill like in the last 8 years, because because
you have a relationship with your lawyer that you love. Right. You love that guy, and you know that he's worth it. And he's not going to take advantage of you.
Obviously worth it. Yeah. So what do you guys the innovation, it seems to me, is that you've managed to package stuff in a way that I guess is predictable, and so it's flat fee. Tell me a little bit about what you guys are doing at ExecutiveLP that makes it different than maybe just going out to your regular old attorney that some friend of yours knows.
Two big innovations, actually. There are two big differentiators between ELP and virtually everyone else. And, the law is really changing right now. It's changing really rapidly. So there may be other people out there that are trying to do a similar thing. But as far as to the best of my knowledge, information, and belief, nobody else is doing what we do the way that we do it. So I sincerely believe, and if I'm wrong about this, I hope someone will reach out to me, because I would love to speak to a kindred spirit. So if someone else is doing this way, then please contact me, nbagwell@executivelp.com. Just email me directly and be like, hey, I'm doing the same thing you're doing. Put it in the subject line. I want to hear from you. I want to talk to you. But as far as I know, nobody else is doing this. So the two big innovations are making a value-based, subscription-oriented legal service for outside general counsel available to small businesses. And when I say available, I mean in a way that's designed for them from the ground up. So while I do have an hourly rate, I do everything in my power not to charge it, because I hate the billable hour. I actually wrote an article years ago called "We Hate the Billable Hour and You Should Too," and posted it on my law firm's blog. It's still up there. Still believe in everything that it says. I hate the billable hour. I hate it mostly because it has some really perverse incentives that are built into the relationship. If you're charging by the hour, you're trading time for dollars. That is completely agnostic to the value that you deliver, and that sucks for the client.
Right.
They're buying your time, regardless of the outcome. It's very Firefly. If you ever watched Firefly, Mal, the ship captain from Firefly, he says, I do the job and then I get paid. And that's all that the lawyer, they typically do. I do the job and then I get paid. They're not, whether or not the job is successful or the outcome is right, they expect to be paid regardless. And I think that that's okay, but the client isn't really in control over how much time you spend or when you spend that time. They can put some limits on it by negotiating the amount of the retainer and sort of all of this. But clients are usually in a very awkward and powerless position to negotiate those kinds of retainer agreements. They treat them like adhesion contracts, which means it's just take it or leave it. So that's the way clients often view them and often treat them. The power imbalance is significant. They don't even realize a lot of times that those things are subject to negotiation. And even when they do hire the attorney, even if they agree to the rate, they're not agreeing to the final price for all the legal services. And I think that really sucks. And the other way that it sucks is that you're not going to call your lawyer if your lawyer's billing $400 an hour, let's say, for outside general counsel services, which is just not patently unreasonable. But if they're billing you $400 an hour for outside general counsel, are you going to call them and talk to them for 12 minutes to get a bill? And you got to know that they're going to be able to deliver $80 or more of value in 12 minutes, because lawyers bill in tenths of an hour. So every 6 minutes is another billing unit. And they bill in those tenths of an hour. Some of them have gone to billing in quarters of an hour. So they round to the nearest quarter of an hour. That's a significant change. That's a thing that happens.
Interesting.
But yeah, tenths of an hour is sort of the standard for the billing unit. And so if you're going to be talking to your lawyer for 12 minutes and getting an $80 bill, you have a strong disincentive to call the lawyer and talk to them unless your hair is on fire. And I hate those incentives. That's what sucks for me. And remember, incentives matter, weirdo economics wonky guy here. So from economic wonkiness world, from that perspective, what we want to do is change the incentives. I want my clients to call me. I want them to call me early and often, right? Because I believe that you should call your lawyer early and often. So it's my responsibility as the lawyer structuring the incentives in the attorney-client relationship to give you an incentive to call me. So what we've done is we have created 2 legal service plans for ongoing legal support for your business for outside general counsel. One of them is for businesses that have less than $1 million in revenue. The other one is for businesses that have more than $1 million in revenue. $1 million is a big threshold, and it has when you hit that threshold and you cross it, a lot of things change. Yeah. But under $1 million in revenue, you bill either $1,500 per quarter or $4,800 per year. So you save about $100 a month going annual with us, and it includes unlimited remote legal consultation service. Here's your incentive. You're no longer in a cab with the meter running. You can call your lawyer, talk as much or as little as you want to get the outcome that you want. And we send weekly emails to every client and remind them, hey, take 20 minutes with your lawyer this week. Schedule a legal check-in. And I was on a call yesterday, unscheduled, with a client, and he called in and he goes, usually these 20-minute phone calls turn into an hour or two. And I'm like, well, it's unlimited. You're not paying any different. So if that's what you need, then that's what you need. And it doesn't bother me. The Pareto principle, the 80-20 rule, tells us that 20% of your clients are going to use 80% of your time. We get that. We get business. We speak business for our clients. And so it doesn't bother us when we have to take more time for some, less time for others. It just balances. Everybody gets unlimited remote legal consultation. And so far, we haven't had any problems delivering on that promise. We also include unlimited legal research, any kind of de minimis legal services. So what most attorneys would consider 3 billing units, which would be about 24, what is that? 18 minutes. 18 minutes would be about 3 billing units. So we just round and we say anything that's 20 minutes or less, no matter what it is, any kind of legal service automatically included in your legal service plan. And then a few other sort of quality of life services we include in that legal service plan. And you get that all for under $5,000 a year, and that's still a tax deductible business expense. So pretty much any kind of business from startup to $1 million in revenue can afford that. Because it's super predictable, you just put it in your cost projections when you're doing your business plan and adjust your pricing accordingly. And you can definitely afford that. We know that you definitely can afford that. And if you can't, then you really can't afford to be in business. So we know that you can have the ongoing legal support that you need. And you might say, well, what about incidental stuff like contracts and whatnot? We charge that on a flat rate. It's still not an hourly fee. It's 15 cents per word for contract drafting, $12.50 for contract review per page. It's just, it's the cost scales with the value and the work product that we deliver. We do a similar thing for businesses that have more than $1 million in revenue. There we offer still a subscription-based legal service plan. We call it Signet. I won't go through the features list because it's very extensive, but it's on our website at ExecutiveLP.com. You can go and click on the link at the top of the page for Signet and see everything that's included. That does include contract services and other things. It's a very, very robust service, and we've developed, it took me 2 years of my life to develop this algorithm that allows us to put in the size of the business, and the algorithm will tell us based on the size of the business, how many lawyers are required to support the business and where the business is located, what they should be spending on preventive legal services based on market data. So we aggregate a lot of statistical data. So there's this ancient quote, everything is worth what its purchaser will pay for it. So we can charge a value-based fee because we know what people are paying for those services generally, like we know the statistics of it. And so we can take that, run it through our algorithm, and generate a value-based fee for preventive legal services based on the size of the business and scale it to the size of the business and the location, the market where it is. So you actually get a true value-based market rate that corresponds to the size of your business. No one else is charging. Everyone else who's charged that I know of that's doing any kind of subscription-based legal services, there's a billable hour component to it.
Right.
This is what I hate about flat fees that most lawyers charge, because most lawyers, when they charge a flat fee, all they're doing is gambling with their client. They're saying to the client, I'm going to charge you a flat rate of X. On the back end of the calculation, they're saying, I think this is going to take this amount of time. I think this is going to take 5 hours, for example. And I want to charge $400 an hour, and I think it's going to take 5 hours, so I'm going to charge you $2,000. That's the math. The client is betting, oh, I think it's going to take you longer than that, right? I think it's going to take you more than 5 hours. So I'm going to save a lot getting a flat fee, because otherwise, if they thought it was going to take less than 5 hours, what would they do? They'd say, just bill me hourly, right? Just bill me for the time you actually spent. They're betting, oh, I think it's going to take you more than 5 hours. So it's cool. I'll save money with a flat fee.
Right.
Who's in a better position to know how long it's going to take, the client or the lawyer? Who does this every day? He does the work. So the house always wins, right? The game is rigged. The lawyer is in a better position statistically. They're more likely to get paid a higher fee versus an hourly rate with the flat fee. But what does that really mean? It means that they're getting paid. If it took them 3 hours, but they're getting paid based on 5, then they're getting 2 hours for free.
Right.
So, and at $400 an hour, that's an extra $800 of cost versus billing hourly. Now, you might turn around and say, well, the client agreed that it was worth that. A flat fee is always a value-based fee because the client agreed in advance that work product, that deliverable was worth $2,000 to them. Everything's worth what its purchase will pay for it, right? You can say, sure. But I think it bears scrutiny. I mean, it's like worthwhile to examine how flat fees are calculated. And if you're really just calculating it not based on really the value to the client, all of that, but based on your hourly rate and how long you think it's going to take and nothing else, then that's not a great way to calculate a flat fee. So what we have done is tried, whenever possible, to eliminate the billable hours. So that was innovation number 1, is predictable, value-based, flat and ongoing flat fees and ongoing fees for ongoing services, subscription-based legal support for small businesses. And it's all designed around small businesses from the ground up. Like, we really reinvented the business model for a law firm in order to support small businesses. And so we don't do anything else. That's all we do. And you don't want a lawyer who does a will here and a divorce there and a DUI over here. You don't want that guy, the kitchen sink lawyer that does everything in the kitchen sink. You don't want that guy forming your new business or negotiating mergers and acquisitions. You want someone that all they do is business law, and they really only do it in this particular niche. You want someone who specializes and focuses. So we deliver that kind of service.
Yeah, and there's a lot of value in that specialization. And I think as a smaller business owner, you go, oh, well, this guy is a car wash and this guy does house cleaning and this person owns a restaurant. Like, the commonalities, like you've said, are really more about revenue in many ways than they necessarily are about the particular unique value or the unique product or service that somebody offers. And helping business owners understand that and see it that way, I think, is very important. And then know, well, okay, I'm going to hire a specialist, right? And it's true in marketing, it's true in law, it's true in medicine. I mean, any professional field that has a wide body of technique and knowledge involved, you want to hire people who are good at that thing you need done. I mean, that seems pretty evident, but it's hard to do. And I think what you guys have done is take what is a pretty daunting process. Right, I'm going to maybe I'm going to interview some attorneys. I'm going to have a shockingly large number next to a /hour, and I'm going to go, God, I hope I never have to talk to this person. Right? I mean, it's it's just a sad place to be.
The lawyer you want to talk to. Yeah. It's not going to cost you any different if you talk to me more. And that's the thing. We really try to be people that other people want to talk to. Every time I have a consultation or a client meeting or whatever, I send out a request for feedback, or try to. I try to be cognizant, and I do that manually. It's not like an automated process. We manually actually ask them for feedback, and we tell them we want your constructive feedback. If something was less than perfect, because again, my standard is if it's not as good as it could have been, it's broken. So if you can imagine that it would have been better, a level higher, we're not just trying to be one level above crap here. Peter Shankman wrote a book. Peter Shankman wrote a book called Nice Companies Finish First. And he said that most people's expectations are crap. Like, they're going to get crap customer service. Their product's not going to, their expectation is disappointment. So if you can be one level above crap, then you're far and away better than most of your competitors. And while I love Peter Shankman and everything that he wrote in that book, so good, I mean, so insightful, and I believe that it's all accurate, for me, that standard is still too low. I want to have really, really, really high standards and really be people talk about the 80-20 rule, the Pareto principle, and I mentioned it earlier, but there's a deeper magic there, as C.S. Lewis would say. There's a deeper magic, and the deep magic is that you can apply the 80-20 rule to itself. 80% of 80% is 64%. 20% of 20% is 4%.
Right.
If you can be in the top 4% of businesses, you're going to be, you're going to represent 64% of the productive, profitable output of those businesses. If you can
Right.
be in the top 4%, you've got 64% market share or something like that. A plus or minus 5 or 10%. I mean, it's not a universal law, but it is generally applicable. It's kind of like stereotypes. Stereotypes are stereotypes for a reason. We may not like them. They're not universally applicable, but they're not completely baseless either.
Right.
So anyway, the biggest thing about ELP that we really want people to know is we're people, and we're people that you want to talk to and that can actually add real value to your business. We can reduce your stress, we can improve your stability, and it's not going to cost you more per hour to talk to us like it will for most of our brothers at the bar. Instead, we're going to charge you one price and deliver as much value as we can for that same price. Like, I had a client that paid less than $17,000 one year, and over a single weekend, I saved him $50,000. That was one weekend. He paid $17,000 for the whole year. Had another client who paid a fee. It was something like, it was under $40,000 for this project. It was under 40,000 was the fee, and the savings that he received was $1.5 million.
Oh yeah, I mean,
it's disproportionate value.
Right, right. Well, and you did, you definitely pointed out early on that, that's the thing. People look at it, they go, okay, is this going to increase my profitability? And people who run a business, and I mean, if sales are good and times are wild, it's easy to run a business and not pay attention. And then, when things get a little different, it's harder, and you got to kind of, look at the levers a little more closely. But to be able to sit down and say, hey, our goal is for this interaction to, obviously it's going to be profitable for me. This is my business. But the goal for you as a business owner is this profitable for you? Like, if I'm not impacting your bottom line, then I need to just get out. Right.
And that's the second innovation. Yeah. That was really the second innovation. The first one was all about charging the right fee, making it predictable, making the cost something that you can budget for, which is something that we were seeing a dearth of that, between small businesses and their lawyers. We were seeing that they really were struggling with the billable hour. The billable hour was a big problem. And so we're just like, okay, well, how do we scrap that? How do we build a law practice around small businesses without the billable hour? And that was a Herculean task of innovation, but we did it. And I'm not going to say that there's no place for the billable hour. There is, but largely it has to do with things that you cannot predict how much time in advance or how much effort or what is going to go into it. It's like all the variables of the project are just so uncertain from the beginning that charging by the hour is the only way to make sense of it. I would say that that's a narrow band of activity. It does include litigation, or a lot of litigation. Some litigation can be done flat fee, but a lot of it probably ought to include the billable hour. But I'm probably, among all the lawyers that you'll ever meet, I'm probably the one who hates lawsuits the most. So it's my job to keep you out of court, and it's also your job to keep you out of court. And if we're both doing our job, then you won't have to worry too terribly much about litigation.
It's a team goal. It's a team goal.
Team sport. Legal support's a team sport.
Yep. My our attorneys have always said, hey man, if we got to go to court, we've already lost a lot of ground, so let's try very hard not to get to that point. And I appreciate that. Well, I'll tell you, let's shift a little. We've had a big year. 2020 and 2021, just the gift that keeps on giving, right? What are you excited about in your business now, and what things do you see on the horizon that are going to kind of be big developments for you coming up this year?
Well, I love that question, and I definitely want to answer it because it talks about, the answer to that question is really the second innovation that we started in. So it's a really nice segue to talk about both answer to what we're excited about now and the second innovation. Before I do, though, I kind of want to speak to something you just said about the lawyers talking about how you're kind of already behind the 8 ball if you have litigation. It reminded me of a quote by Sun Tzu in The Art of War. He said, "Victorious warriors win first and then go to war, while defeated warriors go to war first and then seek to win." And I really genuinely believe in the power of preventive law. That's why I think you ought to include a lawyer early and often. And because I believe in the power of preventive law, and I think that that's something that every small business needs, we're actually trying to set you up for victory if should you ever go to court. You're like the victorious warrior from Sun Tzu who wins first and then goes to war. Whereas if you're playing, you can only really do that if you're playing a proactive game, if you're looking prospectively at how to do everything. And being able to play the proactive game starts with having incentives to include your lawyer early and often in the process. You can't do that if you're disincentivizing client interaction. You're billing by the hour, you're treating them like they're in a cab with the meter running, and of course they're not going to call you. So billing if you're an hourly billing attorney, you're already behind the 8 ball when it comes to litigation, because prior to the litigation, you've given your client an incentive not to call you. And so you haven't really created the conditions necessary for being able to be proactive and win before you go to war. And so we're changing that whole game all around by giving you the incentives you need in order to create the conditions for proactive, preventive, profitable legal support so that you can win first. And then when the lawsuit drops, when the black swan happens, you're prepared for it. You're anti-fragile, you're resilient, you're able to weather that storm. And a lot of nice things happen as a result of being able to be proactive. And what we're really excited about today is the way that's starting to manifest in this second innovation, which we call Profit from Legal. It's what my new podcast is all about. It's what the core offering of our law firm is now.
Right.
I will say, just to give people something that they can anchor their minds to, Profit from Legal is a 6-month business development program. That's what it is. It's developed and designed to help small businesses use legal services to become more profitable. And it's delivered through one-on-one, like lawyer to business training, as well as group training and curriculum that we've developed, things that people can watch, listen to, read, and exercises they can do and implement in their business to get better, as well as insightful instruction and training and mentoring from top professionals. And it's a mixture of not just legal services, but legal operations. If you're in a big corporate environment like Fortune 500 company that has an in-house legal department, there are actually people in those companies that are go-betweens between the pure legal department, the lawyers, and the business people, the managers and HR directors and the C-suite and all that, right? There's this middle group of people called legal operations in the business. And their job is to align the legal services with the enterprise goals. Their job is to make the implementation of legal services in the business efficient and effective, and to help reach the business's business goals using legal services better. There's nothing like that for small businesses right now. Just you look at, hey, if we want to do this in a business that has $25 million or less in revenue, there's just not anything.
Sure.
What we wanted to do was instruct small business owners and decision makers how to use legal services to make their business more profitable. In fact, we want to show them what legal operations can do for their business and how to be more valuable, build a more valuable company using legal services, how to be less stressed by using legal services, and how to be more resilient and more stable using legal services, how to combat fragility. I mean, COVID was a black swan for everybody. It was the kind of thing that could just completely be earth-shaking and disruptive to your business. But it was the kind of thing that no one, even though you could say, yeah, you know, a pandemic could really wreck us, but nobody really saw a specific pandemic on the horizon, so nobody really prepared for it in the way that they could have. But some businesses were better off than others because they were intrinsically more resilient. Building and cultivating resilience in your business is super important. We just recorded an episode of the Profit from Legal podcast with a guy named Ryan Faulkner-Hogg, who writes for Atlas Geographica. And he writes a lot about anti-fragility. He calls it anti-fragility. I prefer resilience because it's less of a mouthful. But resilience is really good. I mean, you need to cultivate resilience in your business and be able to weather the storms as they come. Improving profitability has all three of those effects. It helps make your business more valuable. It helps your relationships be easier to manage, and it also improve profitability. Also improves resilience. And doing each of these other things, focusing on developing asset ecosystems that make your business more valuable, developing relationship management solutions that reduce friction in your business, and being more resilient also improve profitability. So there's this self-feeding cycle of improving profitability, enhancing the value of your business, making your relationships better. Like it's super balanced because each one feeds the other, so you just climb this wonderful ladder back and forth. It makes me think, when I try to visualize the way this all works together, it's like Jackie Chan climbing a wall, and it's like jumping in the corner. You know, I think it was in what was it, the Rush Hour, where he's trying to get over the wall of the embassy, and he goes to this corner and he jumps from one wall to the other, boop, 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 you know, just in that corner, climbing
the super
up.
Parkour move. There you go. Yeah.
Yeah, super parkour. So this is like business profitability parkour, where profitability helps do all these other things, and these other things help improve profitability. And it's not circular reasoning. It's that these two systems are symbiotic and complementary. In that you really do need to have the focus for improving profitability, and then have the method of, we call the 5 legal E's. And it's the method that is the intersection of those two walls, as it were, that you can use to jump off of each other and achieve all these different outcomes. Profit from legal is really exciting, because now for the first time I can actually go to a client and say, okay, if you spend the money for this program, it will pay for itself and then be the gift that keeps on giving. It'll continue to pay for itself. And for a business that has like $500,000, maybe you've got a $15 or $20 million a year business in Dallas, Fort Worth, and you've got a 3-person legal department. So it's still very small, small business, but you've got an in-house legal department, because a lot of people are going to in-house versus outside general counsel. But I mean, the math all works out the same if it's outside general counsel or an in-house department. But let's just say you have an in-house legal department and you're spending $480,000 a year on salary for those 3 lawyers, about $160,000 a piece, and that's pretty average. That's decent. And so you got to ask yourself, if I'm spending $480,000 every year on salary alone for this legal department, how do I know that I'm making $480,000 a year plus back? How do I know that they're revenue neutral? And yes, most small businesses that, and they just kind of seize up, like their CFO. Well, I don't, and that's part of my issue with them is, like I don't really know that I know that what they're doing is valuable, but I don't know that it's exactly $480,000 a year valuable, or more than that. Maybe they're generating $600 or $800 or $1.2 million worth of $600,000, $800,000, whatever, $1.2 million in value. Maybe they're paying for themselves 2 or 3 times over, but if they are, nobody knows it because nobody's quantifying it. So what we do with Profit from Legal is come in, teach the small business owner about legal key performance indicators and how to implement the right metrics for measuring the value that legal delivers for their business. And whether it is in-house legal or outside general counsel, we show you how to measure the value that you're getting from your legal support. And that's great if your legal support, you love your lawyer, right? It sounds like he's been super valuable to you.
Yeah.
And maybe for the first time, he's going to have like real, beyond just emotional job security, but like real by the numbers job security, because you're going to see that he's paying for himself 2 or 3 times over, perhaps. If you love your lawyer, the numbers are telling you, hey, you love this guy, but he's really not, like, he's costing you this, but he's only delivering this much in value. It's also going to it will also reveal the things that he could be doing to close the gap.
Sure.
So I'm not out there trying to like expose lawyers for not delivering the value that they ought to deliver or whatever for the price that they pay. Rather, we want to show where there's room for improvement and how by the numbers they can actually do that, how you can use those legal key performance indicators to deliver the most value. Because remember, it's broken if it's not as good as it could be. And we want to show you this is how good it could be. And here's where you are. Maybe you're better than you thought it could be, or you're under. We want to use the legal key performance indicators to adjust the expectations, either up or down, whatever, to set them more objectively, give kind of a pseudo objective measurement standard for legal productivity.
Well, and every vertical and every business has, everybody will hear KPIs, key performance indicators at some point in their business ownership and going through life. But there's always a set of activities where there's a lot of motion and there's a lot happening, but there's really only one thing that matters is the outcome. So I owned a gym for a little while with another guy. And when, people would talk about, I said, look, I only care about one thing. You walk through that door, you walk out. My goal is when you walk out, you feel better about yourself than when you walked in. Now, how many ways can we make that happen as a team? There's a lot. But if that's not happening, we're not successful. And then once we get that as the baseline, now we can go, I want you to be N happiness units happy. I mean, right now I can work on optimizing just how thrilled you are to leave. And then I can start charging like heroin level pricing, or whatever. But I think the thing that you've hit on is especially what I would loosely call those advisory services, that bail stuff. Banking is a great example. You go, well, what is a banking relationship worth to you? And a lot of people, I don't think they even understand the idea that they can have a relationship with a banker, right?
How to quantify the value. And, if you say, what is that worth to you? They'd be like, well, how the hell do I even measure that? And the same thing is true for accountants and for lawyers. And for years, for decades, really, lawyers have said, well, it's invaluable. That's such a cop-out, right? Like the services that we provide are invaluable. You just need it because there's no way to really measure it because we can't measure. How do you measure the value of lawsuits prevented? They're prevented. Right. It could have been a lawsuit that's millions of dollars. And so how could you ever quantify that? And I find that logic lazy. Like that thinking is really lazy. It's not wrong per se. I mean, all the things you're saying are right. Maybe you did prevent a lawsuit that's millions of dollars and you only charged whatever you charged, but it was less than millions of dollars. And so of course your services were worth it. Yeah. Okay. But I think going beyond just lawsuit prevention and risk mitigation to really holistically see whole picture of what a lawyer should be doing for a business is more than just the focus that a lot of people have had. And you're right that a lot of people they laser in on one thing and they say, well, if we do this one thing, that's a win.
Right.
Okay. And with all due respect, maybe the way people feel when they leave the gym is all that really matters for that gym owner. But for the gym owner's fractional CFO, that's not all that matters. For the fractional CFO, it also matters how profitable is your gym. If your gym is losing money, but people leave feeling much better about themselves, that doesn't matter. How they left when they felt about themselves, or how they felt about themselves when they left, doesn't really matter because your gym won't survive. If it's not profitable, you're not going to be able to make people feel good about themselves for very long because the business won't survive. So the logic of it is profit first. You've got to be profit oriented in order to be resilient, to be able to survive whatever comes down the pike that you may not be able to foresee. You have to have enhanced profitability. Profit has to be everything. And because small businesses exist, and really all businesses exist, to turn a profit.
Well, there
is a popular social corporate citizenship bent where it's like, oh no, we also exist to do some good. So I'm not talking about social enterprise, but I would say that even to social enterprises, look, you guys need to at least break even plus a little bit, right, to keep doing what you're doing.
Well, I mean, it's not the case that, I mean, the nonprofits of the world at scale, I mean, the little mom and pops that you see in towns or whatever they are, but I do think it's just inherently true that if you are paying more for services and for your infrastructure and the goods that you resell, then you can sell them for, well, I got to go get that money somewhere else. And unless you're working for free, somebody's got to pay my salary. So there's some profits got to be built in somewhere, somehow, to make that stuff work. Let me try this, though.
Free lunch, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
It's basic economics. There's no such thing as a free lunch, and incentives matter, and people respond to those incentives.
All right. Here's one for you. You're a small bit. Let's pick a business out of the air. The roofing business, which apparently is a license to print money, from what I'm told. let's say you own a roofing business in a relatively small market, and you're the business owner, and we're coming, what are the levers that you guys pull to say, okay, here's how you decide if your legal services are adding to your profit? Like, what things would you tell them to look for? Or just in general, when you say, hey, legal needs to be profitable or be a center of profit for a business, what are the kinds of things you're talking about?
So we would be looking at, I see the question is trying to laser in with some specificity and industry-based specificity.
Or pick any small business you can think of. Ice cream shop.
Small business. Well, I would put them through our legal profitability scorecard first. First things first. That's what I would do. The legal profitability scorecard we've developed it exists to sort of evaluate what they're already doing well and where there's room for improvement. Sure. Then we would actually dive into their scorecard results and say, we see you're doing this well, but you're not. There's room for improvement here. And there are 4 aspects of the legal profitability scorecard, 4 categories of questions. Okay. And so the answer is both specific and general. It's general because it's categorical, but it's specific in that the specific questions in each category are going to drill down to some like activity level stuff. Are you doing these things? Are you talking to your lawyer regularly about X, Y, and Z? Mm-hmm. So the ultra specific actionable answer is going to come out in the legal profitability scorecard. And if you don't mind, I'll just tell people you can find that legal profitability scorecard online at profitfromlegal.scoreapp.com. That's Score app. So profitfromlegal.scoreapp.com, or you can go to profitfromlegal.com and there's a link right there to the scorecard. So if you take the scorecard, it will tell you, here's what you're doing well, here's what you should improve. But the categories of things generally that people ought to be doing are building asset ecosystems. So an asset ecosystem is a collection of assets that all work together to achieve a specific purpose or promote a certain result. So we help people build out these asset ecosystems. We ask them, what are your goals? We put them through the 5 legal E's process. And the process is encounter, explore, enrich, envision, and enforce.
Okay.
First, we want to encounter you where you are. That's what the scorecard is designed to help us do, is figure out where are you. The explore step is about goal setting. Well, here's where you are, encounter, explore. Where do you want to be? Let's go there together. I remember growing up, we had a 42-acre farm that I grew up on, and the yard part of it that I was supposed to mow as a young teenager was about 4 or 5 acres. And in the back, it was all hills and woods, and so that was a pain. But out front, we had this big open tract of grass that I was supposed to mow. Right. And to keep the line straight, I would pick a spot at the end of the row, and I would focus in on that, and I would just drive towards that one spot. And then I'd turn around and I'd pick another spot just to the left of that, and I'd drive down there. So, just laser in on your goal and just drive straight for it, right? The shortest distance between 2 points is straight line, and all that jazz. So I would do that. And conceptually, we're trying to do the same thing here. We're trying to pick a spot on the visible horizon, like something that you can see from here. What's the goal that you have that's visible from here, and you can see a straight path to it? Don't try to see past a conditional statement and, well, if this or else that. That's too far. That's too complex. You need a straight line between where you are and where you're going. So the next step, let's plan for that. Let's explore that, and then figure out what it is that we're going to do to get to that goal. So that goal setting in the explore step is important. And then you have the enrich step. Let's look at all the tactical stuff that we have at our disposal today. Tactics is doing what you can with what you have. I hate using that quote because it comes from Saul Alinsky, who wrote Rules for Radicals. He's a crazy leftist guy, but he wasn't wrong about what tactics are. He said tactics are doing what you can with what you have. So look at what you have and ask yourself, what can we do with that to reach the goal? Let's look at the systems that are conducive towards getting us to that goal. Let's look at the systems that aren't and ignore those, like weed them out. And then let's look at the ones that with a couple of minor tweaks could get us closer to that goal. That's the enrich step. Then we have the envision step. Let's talk about the vision with our team, with all the people that we need to help us get to that step. Let's share the vision, get everybody on the same page, communicate. and then enforce. The enforce step is really what people think of when they think of lawyers. They think of handbooks and policy statements and disciplinary processes and all the stuff that kind of helps you herd the cats all towards that one goal that you have. But it all starts with encountering where you are and understanding in a centered way exactly where you are, where you want to go, how you want to get there, making sure that everybody is on the same page, and then keeping everybody on the same page as you go, like Moses and the Israelites through the wilderness to the promised land. I mean, that sort of, you can see my upbringing is coming out again. So that's the 5 legal E's process. We do that for building these asset ecosystems, and the asset ecosystems make the business, once they're built, they make the business more valuable because you've taken knowledge and processes and systems and activities out from just between the entrepreneur's ears, and you've manifested them into some objective reality, something that exists.
Sure.
Whether it's a bit of marketing material or, a book that you've written or a policy guide or an employee handbook or an operations manual or whatever that asset may be, now it exists objectively. And if something, God forbid, were to happen to the entrepreneur or small business owner, that would still exist and provide value to the business. A lot of times small businesses aren't as valuable as they could be because all their value is bound up in the person who started the business and what exists in their mind. So we need to build these assets. And then we do the same thing for relationship management solutions. We follow the 5 legal E's process and we ask what your goals are. We just apply it to managing relationships. And we do the same thing, 5 legal E's for legal risks and risk forecasting. The process works. We actually developed this 5 legal E's canvas. It's like a really great problem solving and relationship management tool. And that's one of the gifts that we give away when you take the Profit from Legal scorecard. You get that canvas and it helps you with this exercise walk through the process.
Well, and that's a great idea, and I would encourage anybody who's got a business. I haven't looked. I'm just hearing about it. I'm like, oh, hey, I get this inherently. I love the idea, and I think we'll have the link to that in our show notes, and so go check that link and go check this out. It's absolutely worth your time. I do want to respect your time because I know not only do you have a business to run, but you've got a family to manage. Everybody who comes on the show, we've got the 2 big money questions. Here we go.
Sure.
Number 1, if somebody was going into business for the very first time, regardless of their business, and they came to you and they said, hey, Noel, you've been an entrepreneur, you've seen a lot of business. You're actually in a unique situation because you've seen a lot of business from the inside. So I don't know if that's cheating or an advantage, one of the two. What one piece of advice would you give people who are just starting out, they're thinking about doing something on their own? What would you tell them to concentrate on, and what one piece of advice would you give?
Oh, wow. Write a good business plan and stick to it. And in writing that, so that's the header, that's the headline, right? But in doing that, how you say, well, what does a good business plan mean? You got to unpack that a little bit. You need to read a lot. You need to educate yourself because unless you've been to business school or you have an MBA, you've got a degree in business administration or something like that, unless you have that foundational knowledge for how to run the business, then you're going to fall into the trap of doing what you do, perhaps really, really well, but not doing the business of what you do really, really well. And to be a successful entrepreneur, you have to master not only what it is that you do, but also the business of what you do. And that comes down to having a good business plan that you can actually execute on. And that means that you're going to have to educate yourself. And like starting with a great book like The Entrepreneur Revolution by Daniel Priestley and the folks at Dent Global. I think that's a really good book to start with if you're starting out as an entrepreneur. But also Common Sense Economics by Dr. James Gwartney and a number of other economists. Cool. That book changed my life, just thinking about the science of human decision making. But you need to educate yourself and have a business plan that's based on that self-education, and then execute the business plan is the bottom line. Well, and I think something that comes out when you put it that way, I really love the way you put it. It's easy to start doing the thing you do instead of running a business that's about the thing you do. And one of the things that a business plan does early on is it does help you
certainly get that perspective and step back. I know that one thing that I really like to see in a business plan, and there are a lot of different formats you can use, and they can be complex or simple, is sometimes it's people's first encounter with math. Right, where they've said,
yeah, in a meaningful way, yeah,
right.
Definitely.
Well, and we can
it's
go
one
back
of the
to
reasons franchises are so successful, isn't it?
Right.
I mean, you think about why is a franchise successful? Because they let people do what they do, and they provide you with the business of what you do. They provide you with the business plan part of it. It's just about execution.
And there's
so
a lot
if you're not part of a franchise, you got to
build all that yourself. You got to build it all yourself. Yeah. And coming back, and it's funny talking about the gym and the, feel good about themselves. And that's so true. It's like, it's not enough to have as a goal, oh, I want everybody to have this. It's like, that's got to be laid on top of a framework that allows you to stay in business. And if that framework doesn't involve charging
feeling
enough,
good about yourself, that's what you do.
Yeah.
That's
right.
what you were saying. You were delivering, you were delivering on half. The feeling good about yourself as you leave the gym, that's what the gym does, but it's not the business of what the gym does. So all the business end of it, I categorize it as what would be important to your fractional CFO, right? That's the business of what you do. It's a completely different layer, and both of those two things are necessary. I always tell people, don't start a business with less than three people. It's part of the business plan, but you really need a guy who's like the vision, the execution. He's the get it done guy. You need another guy or gal or whatever who's the numbers person, the CFO type person. And you need this third person who's all about like the record keeping and the systems development. In the old nomenclature of business would be the secretary. So you have the executive, the treasurer, and the secretary. These days, the nomenclature's changed a little bit, but the function is the same. And I refuse to start a corporation for any startup that doesn't have at least those three people. If someone comes to me and they want to be the only shareholder of like an S corporation or something, I will tell them I won't do that. I will do a single member LLC, but I will not form a corporation that has fewer than three founders. I just refuse to do it on principle. I'll say there's a million lawyers out there. Go hire one of them. I'm not going to do it.
Go hire a different one. And I think that spot now is in some way the best use of the chief operating officer is the person who gets that system stuff in place.
100%, yeah.
And make sure quote unquote that the trains run on time because trains running on time is a feature, right? Not only is it a feature of having a profitable railroad, it is a feature of customer service, right? So I think that's hugely important. Yeah, and I love the idea. And the other thing about starting with a business plan that the way you phrase that was so important. When you talk about, you're going to do what you do, and everybody in the business world talks about scaling. Okay, how do I scale? How do I do this at scale? And that issue of scale is the difference between I'm going to spend my time doing the thing that I do versus having a business about what I do. I can't wait to hear that sentence on the playback. But having a business about what I do, and when you've got that plan, you've got the ability to scale because once I get X number of clients, I've got this time debt for them, I've got this resource debt, I need to expand and have perhaps another me, perhaps somebody under my COO function, perhaps I need to change how I do my finances, right? So a business plan puts that, again, what you're after, it's that line across the lawn. And the business plan gives you that line, right? It says, well, this is where we're going to go. And you work with your team to correct as you go, just like a sailboat. You're always kind of changing course,
So many hours on that lawn, but it was so instructive. And what you're talking about with the we call the best way I've ever heard it described is the technician versus strategist problem. Are you a technician in your business or are you a strategist? And if you are a technician in your business, how do you make the leap from being the technician who's, all about how you do what you do to the strategist? How do we do the business of what we do? How do you jump as an entrepreneur? And that's what we see when people cross the $1 million threshold. That's the difference. We see them go from, they figured out how to become a strategist in their business, how to let go of, if you're running a med spa and you're doing Botox injections, how do you go from being a certified licensed, nurse with a doctor who's doing oversight of your small med spa practice? How do you go from being the person who gives the injections, the Botox or lip filler or whatever it is? How do you go from being that person to the person who owns a chain of med spas?
Right.
At some point, you stop doing the injections and somebody else is doing it, right? Someone else is doing that. And now you have the experience of starting up, picking the location, doing all the marketing, like approving all the marketing. You're not doing all that stuff yourself now. Not only do you have someone else who's doing the injections, you have someone else who's setting the appointments, developing the marketing, doing all the other aspects that you used to do. And you're no longer wearing all the different hats yourself. Now you are managing a team.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And I think people inherently think, oh, I like doing what I do, and if I were to go and expand, it would involve a lot more headaches. And actually, the opposite tends to be true, because, I mean, to be sure, managing a team that expands is a challenge, but the stress of having to juggle 9 million chainsaws and a bowling ball and a flaming torch. Like, I'll take just the 9 million chainsaws, please. Skip the bowling ball and the torch. Somebody else can do that, So I think
Look
that's
at
a really
Taylor
good
Swift.
point.
She's a brilliant example of this. And maybe it's just because I'm in, near my offices in Nashville and it's Music City, USA. And so I think of like successful singer-songwriters who write a business. She still has to find time for songwriting. She still has to find time for her. She's a craftsman. She's an artist. And so if your business is art, like I have another client, a guy who he actually made this knife. He knows I'm into steampunk, right? He made this from scratch. Like he made the blade. It sits on my desk and he made like all the little gears and put them in the resin and everything of the handle. And this is one of the first, major knives that he made in his business. It's called Primitive Grind. His name is Joe Maynard. He was on like Naked and Afraid. And anyway, he's a big knife guy and he's a craftsman. Right. And he is on this journey right now of scaling up his business. And when I started doing some work for him, he said, what's it going to cost me and everything. And he's a veteran. And I knew his story and everything. And I said, you know what? I want a Primitive Grind Joe Maynard knife. Like, there you go. I don't know what that's worth today and I don't care, but I see your potential. I know what that's going to be worth in the future. Right. Trust me, I'm getting the better end of this bargain. You're a craftsman. I believe in you. And so he made me that. And he also made me this really cool lamp stand that it sits on. It sits on my desk every day. And sometimes, you have to figure out how to make time to stay a craftsman. I think Joe is always going to make knives and Taylor Swift is always going to write songs and sing songs, but that doesn't mean that that's their primary, as a business owner, that's their primary shtick every day. Like they have to find time to do that at a really high level, but they also have to find time for the business of what they do and being able to balance that. And maybe even as your business scales up and grows, prioritizing the business of what you do over what may be your true undercurrent, your passion of making knives or writing songs or whatever it is, making really great food or hospitality experiences or accounting services or, connecting people with real estate, whatever your industry is, whatever your shtick is, whatever your medium is. You are an artist above all things. And that means you need to understand the business of art. How do you get your art in a gallery? Otherwise, you're going to die a starving artist, a craftsman who dies in obscurity and your work is only valuable after you're gone.
Right. Yeah.
The extent that you leave something behind.
If
you're lucky enough to leave legacy.
Yeah, I agree with that completely. And I think figuring out, that beginning to have the germ of the idea for how you organize your business that way starts at the business plan. And I think that's regardless of how complicated it is, whatever, just the exercise. We have a course on, taking your side hustle and turn it into a business. And one of the things that we do in the first several lessons is we go, okay, now you're at number 6. If you go back and look at your notes from 1 through 5, you just wrote a business plan. Done. Right. And so I think it's extremely, extremely good advice. And all right, now this is it for all the money. The big question.
Okay. The $64,000 question.
This is the $64,000 question. This is Double Jeopardy. This is Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, all wrapped up into one. If you could have a meal with any living public figure, who would that person be and what meal would you share?
I would like to have sushi with Lauren Tsai. Lauren Tsai was I just want sushi because I love sushi. I love Japanese food, but like
That's fair. That's
udon
fair.
noodles or soba noodles would be just as good. Like I really don't care. I like just all Japanese food pretty much. But I really admire Lauren Tsai. I really like up and coming artists. I love Taylor Swift. Taylor Swift would probably be another really great person to have a meal with, but you made me pick one. And so I wanted to pick someone who was less well known than Taylor Swift. Lauren Tsai is a brilliant illustrator and artist, but she's also a model. And she really came into prominence or recognition in the public sphere by being on a reality show called Terrace House, based out of Japan.
Okay, cool.
But they did a season of Terrace House in Hawaii. She was on the Hawaii season. She was like a reality TV show star person. But she's extremely, extremely talented as an illustrator, a beautiful model. She actually got some acting gigs. She was on the FX series Legion. She got a bit part on there. So she's done some acting, modeling, but I think her chief passion in life seems to be as an illustrator. She's just such an interesting person, and I would love to have a meal with her and talk about the development of her personal brand and how she brings together modeling and illustration, animation. She's designed this little 3D character that now is like an augmented reality app. So you can she created and illustrated this 3D character that now through augmented reality, you can just put on your desk. You can kind of live there through the AR device. Yeah. And it's, or wherever you are, and it doesn't have to be your desk. It could be on, wherever you are. She can now carry this little illustrated character she made everywhere she goes with her. And it just sort of dwells with her. And that is fascinating to me. The technology side of it, the business side of it, the illustration, the art, and also her creative journey, how she used her intrinsic, like her body, like her modeling, right?
Right.
And the attractiveness that she has to create opportunities for herself to generate attention and cast a spotlight on what she values. She may not even value, I don't know how much models actually value their appearance beyond the functional. They don't want to, they're human beings. They don't just want to be valued for their physical beauty. They want people to see, like we all do, beyond the exterior to the interior of who they are as a person. But models often use that to, get attention and then redirect it onto whatever it is they're passionate about, whether it be like a public cause or something like that. And I know Lauren, I follow her on Instagram, and she does that. She has a bit of activism that she tries to draw attention to through everything that she does in the public space. And to me, that is absolutely fascinating. The intersection of someone who's a truly talented, creative professional, as well as, a model, someone who uses their God-given talents and abilities to do what they do. And then also is really successful in their business pursuits. Like she's done that. I think people like that are absolutely fascinating.
Well, I just looked her up really quick. Honestly, I hadn't heard of her. And I like her already because I was born in a state beginning with M, Maryland. She was born in Massachusetts. We were both raised in Hawaii, so obviously we have a lot in common. But I do think there. One of the things I love about asking guests that question is, there's an element of, oh, gee, what do I say? But you learn a lot not only about some really cool people, but you also learn a lot about how and why they appeal to you, right? I get people, and you can kind of see it. We got the Rock joins me often. And people are like, oh my gosh, you, and it's like, oh, I love the Rock, and they're like, so here's this dude who's run a marketing firm, and is, it's a PhD. Why does he love the Rock? It's like, oh, I can talk to you about the Rock all day. And listening to people talk about other folks who they respect, I think is such a it's a great window not only on learning more about people who are worth studying and emulating a little bit, but then you kind of unpack, well, what does it mean to be inspired by somebody? And from there kind of go on and adopt what you learn from them. And I love that idea. It's like, hey, I'm using a gift that I've refined into a talent in order to create a platform for me to do work that has a lot of meaning to me. It's like, yeah, exactly. That's great. I love that. I love that idea.
Arnold Schwarzenegger is another guy who's like that.
Oh, yeah.
Like if you want to go to the guy side of the gender spectrum, I mean, The Rock is a guy like that. Arnold Schwarzenegger is a guy like that. The people who started out as like bodybuilders, Sylvester Stallone, although he didn't start out as a bodybuilder, he started in the adult film industry, but then he crossed over into the mainstream film industry. And, all of these people that we're talking about, they started out with, like we say, these kind of God-given talents or abilities, a lot of times because they're physically attractive people, but they don't just stop with just being physically attractive. They refine that into a skill, whether it's modeling or bodybuilding or acting or whatever. And then they're not satisfied to stop there because it's not as good as it can be. I think for them, I see in those people a reflection of my value that if it's not as good as it can be, it's broken. And so they're constantly chasing excellence. They're constantly trying to be as good as they can be as a person, and then use the attention that they get along the way to cast a spotlight onto things that they believe are really meaningful, that are really important, that give them meaning and value and purpose in their life, that kind of move the needle at an existential level.
Absolutely. And I think that finding those people, and I think it's very easy for the public, if you will, you look at somebody in the public eye and then you go, oh, they said something I didn't like, and then whatever, we can talk about that and then kind of reject them out of hand as being a worthwhile example. But you go, well, for crying out loud, I would hate to have anybody come through everything I've ever done or said and from there determine the value of whether or not I've got something to offer. And one thing I do enjoy about seeing a lot of different public figures in the work that they do is you go, wow, okay, what motivates them to do that? What makes them the craftsman that's taking that thing and going, hey, I can make it better. I think that's a brilliant way to look at it. And hey, with that, I've used up a lot of your time. We really appreciate it. Again, our guest today is Noel Bagwell. He is the proprietor and founder of Executive Legal Professionals. That's at ExecutiveLP.com. Also, the Profit from Legal podcast. And is that ProfitFromLegalPodcast.com or ProfitFromLegal.com? I don't have it in front of me.
Just go to ProfitFromLegal.com. There's a link there to the Legal Profitability Scorecard. We also do the Legal Insight workshops. We talked a little bit about unpacking the legal scorecard results. We tend to do that in a half-day workshop. It's just a flat fee for the workshop. It's like $2,500. And we take half a day. You get the Profit from Legal keynote, the unpacking session, a bit of Q&A, and then we deliver a custom report for the client saying, based on everything that we've talked about, the results of the workshop and everything, these are the things that we recommend you do first to really move the needle as fast as possible, get some quick wins in terms of improving profitability in your business. And all that's on, and the podcast and everything else, a bunch of other articles and free research and resources are available at ProfitFromLegal.com.
All right. I love it. Well, hey, hang out a little bit. We'll stop recording, say goodbye to everybody, and we'll see you in the next episode. And Noel, you and I can chit-chat a little bit. Thanks again for coming on. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining us. You can find contact information about our guest in the show notes for this episode. This has been the How I Make Money podcast by Brand Distillers. To learn more, visit branddistillers.com.